This week is going to be very exciting with the launch of Judith Collins' book No Punches Pulled. I await my personal signed copy with interest. I'm in the book, of course, and I talk about one instance that has already been published as an excerpt. With the campaign season underway, we're getting a lot of political commentary about what is happening and what polls are showing. I'll help you identify the wheat from the chaff. We also look at the state of media in New Zealand and wonder about the lack of conservative voices. There are solutions, so I'll explore that with you. And speaking of media, you'll laugh at the Washington Post's latest failed hit job on Donald Trump that actually proves what he's been saying about the worst cities in the US for crime. Turns out he's right. They are held by Democrats. I'm Cam Slater, and this is Insight Politics. God loves an optimist or a trier, and he must really be shining his blessings on New Zealand Herald columnist Audrey Young. She's declared that National now has a path to victory. She really does. Here's her tortured reasoning. National has a clear path to power. It is not necessarily a probable path, but the elements required are certainly not improbable. In general, it would involve Labour losing about 5 points to National in the next 3 months, and New Zealand First and the Greens falling short of the 5% threshold without a seat. For example, with Labour on 45% and National on 42%, ACT on 4%, the Greens on 4% and New Zealand First on 3%, National and ACT would form a government. That would see Labour lose 5 points, National gain 5, the Greens lose 2, New Zealand First and ACT to increase by 1 point. It is not far-fetched. New Zealand First might scrape home, but the electorate appears to be tiring of Winston Peters' belligerence. There will be other combinations of votes that will get to a similar outcome. Well, that isn't a path to victory. That's what used to be called a forlorn hope. And let's examine just how improbable her pipe dream is. First up, her path to victory assumes both the Greens and New Zealand First won't make it back into Parliament, and at the same time, Labour slides 5 points without that benefiting either New Zealand First or the Greens. In her blue-tinged world, only National benefits from such a scenario. She forgets the wasted vote if that occurs, with the spoils going on a pro-rata basis to the largest vote, which is likely to be Labour. Her unlikely scenario assumes around 7% wasted vote. Labour, now on 45% in her fantasy, would likely pick up 3% of that and have enough to govern alone, or it will deliver a hung parliament. Not all of that drop in Labour's support would go to National, yet that is precisely what she has claimed. She also presumes that neither New Zealand First nor the Greens will campaign to differentiate themselves from Labour. New Zealand First has already started to do that, and if Labour wants to die in a ditch over Ihumātao, it'll be Winston Peters who will benefit from that. And if, as I suspect, National fails to fire and voters simply abandon them, then expect ACT and New Zealand First to also benefit. Todd Muller may have packed out the hall in Havelock North on a wet Thursday night, but those I've spoken to who were there were left somewhat disappointed with the result. Muller is solid and safe, but he is also boring. His best campaign would be to not campaign and let the government keep making mistakes. This election is Labour's to lose, and that is the only path to victory that National has, not Audrey Young's sticky blue knickers of a fantasy. She provides no insight as to how National proposes to gain another 5 points, other than to have a plan to be like Labour, just slightly less shit. Even their billboards say so. Strong team, more jobs, better economy, party vote National. I wonder how much they paid some consultants for that. I'd be asking for my money back. It is grammatically awful and continues the trend of politicians talking to their constituents like children. Todd Muller has done one good thing, however. He's announced that the campaign in Auckland is to be run by both Nikki Kay and Judith Collins. Nikki will no doubt manage the wet campaign in central Auckland, and Judith will shore up the Conservative vote. Audrey Young has been around politics for a long time. She should know better than to present wishful thinking as a credible path to victory. Any commentary that has as many variables as she has used to make a desired outcome happen is a pipe dream and not credible commentary. We'll be getting a flurry of polls in the coming weeks. The sensible commentators will look at the trends the data shows. Using a crystal ball and wishing for particular outcomes is a path to embarrassment. Sadly, this is the method many in the press gallery use. There is a distinct lack of sensible political commentary from our media, which is why we need to grow conservative media in New Zealand. The left-wing approach to political discourse, as witnessed by Nikki Hager's attacks on conservative voices, is to smear, denigrate, and use lawfare to try to silence them. Silencing opponents is what they do. They don't want a contest of ideas because their ideas are mostly crap, very expensive, and eventually lead to ruin. Conservatives play into their hands because they abandon those who are smeared instead of standing tall and being brave. The march of the left wing through media continues, and slowly but surely conservative voices are being silenced. Interestingly, at the same time, the media companies are showing reduced revenues. Does no one in the decision-making ranks ever stop to wonder if there's a correlation between falling revenues and the removal of conservative voices? When News Talk ZB saw the retirement of Larry Williams and Leighton Smith, did no one in their ranks of management stop and ask themselves, I wonder who our audience wants to hear? Did they look at what worked in the past and is still currently popular, as in Mike Hosking, and pause to think that maybe doing more of that would work rather than hiring and deploying socialist weasels to harangue their audience? In the US, Pew researchers found in 2004 that 17% of the public regularly listens to talk radio. This audience is mostly male, middle-aged, and conservative. And among those who regularly listen to talk radio, 41% are Republican and 28% are Democrats. Furthermore, 45% describe themselves as conservatives compared to 18% who say they are progressive liberals. Why would New Zealand be any different from that? Where now are our Sean Hannity's and Rush Limbaugh's and Joe Rogan's? Instead, we've got wetter, and soaking hosting radio shows. The sole exceptions are breakfast radio and drive time, which are bookends on a day of liberal hand-wringers. And the same goes for media in general. When the editorial team sits down at Stuff and the Herald or One News or News Hub, why do they say things like, let's use our platform to push climate change because it's a thing and important? No, it's not. It's only a thing in left-wing circles. When polled, most people don't even have climate change in their top 10 issues. Why do they say, let's call New Zealand Aotearoa and start speaking Maori? That's what our audiences want. Well, actually, the audience don't even think about it, unless they are wet liberal hand-wringers, of course. And I'm damn sure that Kingi Ropatu, who works at the Freezing Works, doesn't call New Zealand Aotearoa or even speak Maori. We all have better things to do than run campaigns using mostly state-funded media to try to get us to start to calling our country Aotearoa. Maori make up 15% of the population. Maori speakers even less. Yet these media organisations are foisting Maori on us all, mainly because, like the sickly, feeble-minded socialist weasels they are, they think they know what is best for us all. And so where are the conservative voices? Why is the spin-off easily able to get 10,000 paying members? Have conservatives really disappeared, or are we just too quiet for our own good? Why do media decision-makers look at CNN with its rapidly diminishing viewership, the Washington Post and their diminishing readership, and say, let's be like them, instead of looking at Fox News or Sinclair Media Group or Sirius XM or Breitbart or PJ Media and say, whoa, would you look at the growth there? Let's be like them. Instead, like the simpering liberal elites, they know best. That's why you see the Herald syndicate the failing Washington Post, and our television stations repeat CNN and MSNBC lies and smears. And that's why the media aren't trusted. That's why they're failing. They stopped listening to their audience and started lecturing them. And it's time to take back the media in New Zealand. If the Herald and stuff won't listen to you, if television and radio won't listen to you as an audience, then it is time to support organisations that will listen to you. Support conservative media by taking up memberships or volunteering services. With enough support, we can launch our own Sirius XM in New Zealand, provide our own talkback stations, fill our own conservative newsrooms, and take the fight to the liberal elite media weasels. We could launch our own Project Veritas and expose bent media and corrupt politicians. It can be done, and it starts right here, right now. Tell a friend, encourage them to join, share on social media, and don't be afraid to speak your mind. Be brave, be strong, support conservative media. Speaking of the liberal and corrupt media, the Washington Post, the outfit that both Stuff and the Herald republish from, has tried to fact-check Donald Trump and ended up shooting their own feet off. They are trying to refute this quote from Donald Trump.
You know, we have a record this year on crime, a record positive rating on crime this year, the best. And you hear about certain places like Chicago, and you hear about what's going on in Detroit and other cities, all Democrat-run. Every one of them's Democrat-run. 20 out of 20. The 20 worst, the 20 most dangerous are Democrat-run. We have one city or two cities in particular, worse than Honduras, worse than Afghanistan. And these are cities within the United States, Democrat-run, radical left-run. You see what's going on in Seattle. You see what's going on in other places. Seattle, of all places, who would even think that's possible? 20 out of 20. The Democrats want to weaken very substantially our law enforcement and our police. And frankly, they want to defund largely, at least largely. There are some that want to defund and abolish our police, if you can believe that. And we're not letting that happen.
Philip Bump of the Washington Post fact-checked President Trump's claim and made the claim that Trump was dead wrong. Trump keeps claiming that the most dangerous cities in America are all run by Democrats. They aren't, reads the headline of his fact-check. He even provides a handy chart to prove his claim that Trump is wrong. And what does that chart show? Well, let's use Philip Bump's own words to slay him. The most recent data to the effect is from the FBI's Uniform Crime Report covering the first half of 2019. The cities with the most violent crimes are many of the most populous cities in the country, as you might expect. Those with the highest rates of volume of violent crime are from a range of different states. Most of the current mayors of these cities are Democrats. Two of the mayors of the cities with the most reported violent crimes overall, though, are independents, and one, the mayor of Jacksonville, Florida, is a Republican. Among the 20 cities with the most violent crimes per capita, one isn't a Democrat, the independent mayor of Springfield, Montana. So, according to Philip Bump, Trump is dead wrong because in his selection of cities with the worst crime, 2 out of the top 20 worst places are actually led by independents and one led by a Republican. He completely ignores that the other 17 are Democrat strongholds and only Jacksonville, Florida, at position 16 is Republican held. His gotcha story ended up getting himself recognized as a fabulist. When the facts don't fit their narrative, these agents of the left just carry on regardless. So by this standard, because of only 17 out of 20 of the most violent cities are run by Democrats, or 19 out of 20 of the most violent cities per capita are run by Democrats, Trump's claim that the most dangerous cities in the country are run by Democrats is false. No doubt the New Zealand Herald will run this exact article in a couple of days as they continue their orange mad bad shtick. That's the dishonesty of media for you. Is it really that hard for the media to admit when Trump is right? How many bullshit fact checks does it take for a journalist, no doubt trained and skilled, to be embarrassed? Judith Collins' new book is out this week. Entitled Pull No Punches, Judith sets about correcting some of the more scurrilous accusations levelled against her over time. She talks candidly about the so-called Orovida scandal and reveals that far from being an unauthorised visit as portrayed by John Key at the time, he had in fact not only authorised the visit, but also suggested parts of her trip. Of course, John Key conveniently forgot all that, and he and Bill English continue to smear Judith with the murk around that visit to this day. Now the facts are revealed, perhaps they might like to cease doing that. One other key area that is revealed is the details surrounding her resignation. An extract from the book has been published at Stuff, and in that extract she reveals how John Key came by the email used to force her to resign. Contrary to popular belief, it came not from Nikki Hager's criminal hacker, but actually from Kathy Odgers. It was sent directly to Belinda Milnes, a longtime friend of Odgers, and then given to John Key. I've kept silent on this betrayal of trust from Kathy Odgers, but I can now say my piece. And this explains why I never mention her, never link to her, and will never entertain talking with her ever again. I too had to front the Chisenham inquiry. Odgers never did. Instead, she did what she always does when the shit hits the fan, she cut and run. Instead, she sent a letter and washed her hands of all the destruction she wrought. I haven't spoken to her for more than 5 years, and am ever unlikely to ever speak to her again. As a note for her, should she be listening to this, I've kept her trust in the things she shared with me over the years. Perhaps she might like to reflect on that, considering the damage that could result should that information ever be shared. John Key, for his part, was forced to apologise to me by the Privacy Commissioner for publishing the email in question. He wrote me a letter. It was the last communication I ever had from him. He did ring my father in an act of abject cowardice to pass on a message to me. And that message was, no hard feelings. Dad, to his credit, told Key to call me himself. He never did. And as an aside, when I was asked when I was in Israel if I would apologise to John Key, I said no, I had nothing to apologise for. The interviewer then asked, or said, but he's the Prime Minister, to which I replied, and one day he won't be, and I'll still be here. Well, I'm still here, and John Key is no longer Prime Minister. No hard feelings, John. I'm glad the facts are now out. The book is a great read, and we will have 3 signed copies available as prizes for members. So if you aren't a member now, best you sign up to go into the draw. Be very wary of commentators who make broad statements without explaining how they arrived at those statements. Sometimes they're shilling for one of the parties, but mostly they're just offering up wishful thinking. Media have aligned themselves over time with the left wing, either deliberately or as a result of creeping socialism through our institutions. The commentary they seek is increasingly left-wing. But don't despair. We as conservatives can actually do something about that. With modern technology like the internet and cloud-based computing, we can easily compete with the mainstream media. Unlike them, we can build a community of interest and then leverage those platforms. We do have a voice, and as we have shown in recent posts, we have a wide appeal for the information we impart. Hell, we even beat the government's own websites during the Chinese plague kerfuffle. It is with the support of members that we are able to take the fight for conservative values to the market. And I'm confident that when it comes to a debate over values and policies, that we have the better proposition than that offered by liberals or progressives, or what we used to call them, socialists. Support conservative media and those media outlets who represent your worldview. Don't let the socialists control where you get your news and ideas from. Be brave. If you aren't, then people like Nikki Hager will be framing political discourse, not people like you. I'm Cam Slater, and this was Insight Politics.